Dive into frozen hell in Napoleon's 1812 Russian invasion. One soldier's epic survival against starvation, disease, and unimaginable cold, where 95% never returned, but the human spirit endured. You think you know cold? You think you understand what it means to be hungry? Well, friend, let me tell you what we. Consider hardship today would barely register as mild discomfort to the men who marched with Napoleon's Grand Army. The shocking truth is that of the nearly 600,000 soldiers who invaded Russia in 1812, fewer than 30,000 made it back. That's right, over 95% of them never returned home. And contrary to what you might believe, it wasn't just the famous Russian winter that killed them. Starvation, disease, and combat had already decimated there. Ranks long before the first snowflake fell. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. So, congratulations. You just woke up in France, 1805, the straw mattress beneath. You crackles as you shift, not like your comfy bed right now. This one's lumpy and crawling with fleas. The room stinks of sweat and cheap wine. Thin morning, light filters through a dirty window, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Outside, a church bell tolls the hour, 6 in the morning. You're 20, years old, the son of a farmer, and today might be the worst day of your life. It's conscription day. Napoleon's. Wars demand bodies, lots of them, and you're just the right age to feed the emperor's insatiable appetite for conquest. The law says all young men between 20 and 25 must participate in the annual lottery. If you draw a high number, you're safe for now. Draw low, 1, and you'll be marching off to war within weeks. The town square buzzes with nervous energy. Mothers clutch their sons' arms. Some are praying, others crying. A few desperate young men have actually mutilated themselves to avoid service, chopping off trigger fingers or front. Teeth needed to bite open powder cartridges. But the examining doctors have seen every trick. They'll likely send the self-mutilators to the punishment battalions anyway. Your number is called. Your hand trembles as you reach into the wooden drum. The paper slip feels impossibly small between your fingers. You unfold it slowly, heart hammering in your chest. Number 17. The recruiting officer grins. Report to the barracks tomorrow. Bring nothing. The emperor provides. Everything his soldiers need. Your mother collapses against your father. There are options, of course. The wealthy can pay for substitutes. Poor men willing to take their place for the right price. But your family has no such money. Some try to run, but gendarmes are efficient at hunting deserters, and the punishments are severe. The bullet, the chain gang. You're going to war. Morning comes too quickly. Dawn hasn't even broken when you report to the recruiting station. You're not alone. Dozens of other young men stand in awkward clusters. Some defiant, some terrified, most somewhere in between. A few are actually excited, true believers in Napoleon's vision of France, triumphant. Others have simply accepted their fate, with the grim resignation of men who've never had much control over their lives. Anyway, the recruiting sergeant is a scarred veteran missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Strip, he orders. Medical inspection. Naked and shivering, you wait your turn. As the regimental surgeon examines each conscript, height, weight, teeth, eyesight, listening to chest with a crude wooden stethoscope, he peers into mouths, checking for the teeth needed to tear open powder cartridges. He examines. Hand for all fingers, especially the trigger finger. The physically unfit are sent home, not out of mercy but practicality. The army doesn't want men who will collapse on the march. 5 feet 7 inches, the surgeon mutters, measuring you. Healthy teeth, good chest, no obvious diseases, fusilier material. And just like that, you're in the infantry. If you've been over 5 feet 10 inches, You might have made the grenadiers the elite shock, troops who lead assaults. Under 5 feet 4 inches, and you be a voltigeur, the light infantry, who skirmish ahead of the main force. At 5 feet 7 inches, you're destined for the line infantry, the backbone of Napoleon's army. They issue your kit. Immediately, the uniform consists of a blue jacket with white facings, white, waistcoat and breeches, black gaiters, and a shako, a tall cylindrical hat with a brass plate bearing the imperial eagle. In addition, you receive a great coat, spare shirt, wooden canteen, haversack, and a mess tin. The uniform is surprisingly heavy, the wool thick and rough against your skin. The shako alone weighs several pounds and feels precarious on your head. Then comes your weapon, the Charleville Model 1777 musket, nearly 5 feet long with a wicked 17 inches bayonet. It weighs over 10 pounds. You nearly drop it when the quartermaster shoves it into your hands. That's your wife now, he says with a yellow-toothed grin. Treat her better than any woman. Clean her, oil her, protect her from rain. She'll save your life if you respect her. You're marched to the barracks, where a corporal assigns you a bunk in a long room filled with similar beds. Each accommodates 2 men. Your bunkmate is a veteran named Michel, a farmer's son, like you, but with 3 years' service. First rule, Michel says not unkindly, guard your kit with your life. Thieves everywhere. Second rule, learn to sleep. When you can, you'll miss sleep more than food on campaign. The training begins immediately, and it's brutal. 16 hours a day of marching, weapons drills, and formation tactics. French infantry fight in close packed. Lines, 3 men deep. The front rank kneels, the middle stands, the rear passes loaded muskets forward when fighting in intense engagements. You practice until your arms burn and your legs shake. Left, right, in. Step, you miserable peasants. The sergeant bellows. You march like old. Women, the emperor expects 80 paces a minute. Every step exactly 2 feet. You practice loading and firing your musket endlessly. Bite cartridge, prime. Pen, pour powder down barrel. Ram ball and paper, aim, fire over and over and over. The musket kicks like an angry mule against your shoulder, leaving it bruised for weeks. Your hands blister. From the ramrod, then callous. The drill sergeant times you with his pocket. Watch. 20 seconds a load is acceptable. 15 seconds is good. Under 12 seconds. And you might live through your first battle. You work until you can load and fire 3 times in a minute. The volley practice is terrifying. 100 muskets, firing simultaneously. The crash so loud it makes your ears ring for hours. The black powder smoke is choking, stinging your eyes and coating your throat. And this is just practice. Real battle, the veterans assure you, is 1,000 times worse. Weeks pass. You are no longer an individual, but part of something enormous. The regiment becomes your world. You learn its history, its battle, honors, its traditions. The veterans tell stories around the campfire. Tales of Italy, Austria, Prussia, Spain. Napoleon seems almost mythical in these accounts. The little corporal who became emperor, who hasn't lost a major battle, who rewards courage and talent, regardless of birth. You're even starting to believe your training group, originally 120 men, is now down to 97. Some deserted despite the risks. Others were discharged as physically unfit after proving unable to keep up with the demands. The rest of you have changed, tanned, hardened, moving and acting as one unit. Even the spoiled son of the town merchant, who arrived with soft hands and a sneer, now marches in perfect step beside the butcher's boy and the blacksmith's apprentice. The food is better than you expected. 1 and 12 pounds of bread daily, half a pound of meat, vegetables when available, and a wine ration that helps ease the soreness after a day of drilling. The pay is meager, around 8 francs a month for a private soldier. But it's something. Most send half home to their families. The third month brings something new, integration with the main army. Your training unit is broken up, the men distributed among the fusilier companies of the regiment to replace losses from previous campaigns. You find yourself in the 4th Company of the 57th Line, Infantry, a regiment so renowned for its fighting spirit that they're known as the Terrible. Your company captain is a short, broad man with a dueling scar across his left cheek. I don't care where you're from, he announces to the new arrivals. I don't care who your father was. Show courage in battle. Obey orders promptly and you'll do well here. Show cowardice or hesitation and you'll answer to me personally. Your Corporal Bernard is more practical. Stay close to the veterans in your first battle. He advises, do what they do. Don't stop to help the wounded. That's for the surgeons behind the lines. And if you're hit, he shrugs, make your peace quick. We can't stop for you. Time accelerates. You're part of Napoleon's Grand Army now, the most formidable fighting force in Europe. The Emperor is preparing for war against the latest coalition. Austria, Russia, Britain. The camps buzz with rumors. We'll march to Vienna. No, to Moscow. We're bound for Cadiz to launch an invasion of England. The veterans laugh at these guesses. The little corporal keeps his plans close, says Michel. We'll know our destination when we're halfway there. Orders come suddenly on a cool autumn morning. The entire army is to assemble for review. Over 100,000 men gather on a vast plain outside the city. Regiments form into brigades, brigades into divisions, divisions into corps. The scale is breathtaking. You've never seen so many men in one place. All in. Formation, weapons gleaming. A ripple of excitement passes through the ranks. The Emperor is coming. He appears on a white horse. The famous gray greatcoat, the simple hat without ostentation, so different from the gilded monarchs of other nations. He rides with his marshals, those former commoners he elevated to nobility through merit rather than birth. Men like Ney, the son of a barrel maker, now a prince of the empire, or Murat, the innkeeper's boy, now king of Naples. Napoleon reviews the troops, stopping occasionally to speak with ordinary soldiers. He knows his regiments, their battle honors, their heroes. Men strain to catch a glimpse of him, this legend in the flesh. When he passes your section, he seems smaller than you imagined, but his presence is undeniable. His eyes miss nothing. That night, orders spread through the camp. We march at dawn. The destination, Austria. The Austrians have violated the Treaty of Pressburg, and the Emperor intends to remind them why that was. Unwise. Sleep is impossible. The camp hums with preparations. Sergeants check and double-check equipment. Commissary officers distribute extra rations for the march. Blacksmiths work through the night, shoeing horses and repairing wagon wheels. You write a hasty letter home, unsure when you'll next have the chance. You doze fitfully and wait before the drums. The eastern sky is just beginning to lighten, pale pink against the darkness. Across the vast encampment, thousands of campfires glow like earthbound stars. The smell of coffee and with smoke fills the air. Men move about like shadows, checking equipment one last time. The drums begin, the familiar rhythm that will govern your life for years to come. Tens of thousands of men rise as one, form ranks, hoist packs, and muskets. The weight is substantial. Nearly 60 pounds of equipment that you will carry for hundreds of miles. The Grand Army stirs. A massive beast awakening. Artillery rumbles into position. Cavalry mounts. Up, leather creaking. Horses snorting plumes of vapor in the cool morning air. Infantry forms in columns, each regiment with its eagle standard held high, the symbol of imperial glory that must never ever fall into enemy hands. The order comes down the line. En avant march. You take your first step into war. Another anonymous soldier in the greatest army the world has ever seen. As dawn breaks fully, illuminating the endless columns stretching ahead and behind, you realize the magnitude of what you've joined. This is not just an army. It's a force of nature, a human avalanche about to crash across Europe. And somehow you must survive it. You've moved only a few miles that first day. When the sound of hoofbeats draws near, a messenger gallops past, heading for the front of the column where the general rides. Minutes later, orders filter back. The pace quickens. No explanation is given, but the veterans recognize the signs. The Austrians are on the move. Michel mutters, "We're going to catch them before they're ready." The road stretches. Ahead, disappearing into the horizon. Beyond it lies Austria, Russia, perhaps even Moscow. Towns and villages you've never heard of where you might fight, bleed, or die. The weight of the pack digs into your shoulders. Your musket feels impossibly heavy, but your legs keep moving left, right in. Perfect time with thousands of others. You are no longer just a farmer's son from a forgotten village. You are a soldier in Napoleon's Grand Army, and the world is about to learn once again why that fact makes emperors tremble. The rhythm of the march becomes your entire world. Left foot, right foot, hour after hour, day after day. The Grand Army moves like a massive serpent across the countryside, consuming everything in its path, 30 kilometers daily, sometimes more. When Napoleon demands speed, your feet blistered during the first week. Bloody patches stain your white gaiters as poorly fitted boots rub. Your skin raw. Veterans show you their trick, rubbing animal fat on your feet each morning, then wrapping them in strips of cloth before putting your boots back on. It helps, but not enough. The pain is constant. You'll grow leather feet soon enough, Michel promises. Then only the pebbles matter. The Grand Army on the march is a sight like no other. From any hilltop, you can see columns stretching for miles, infantry in the center, cavalry on the flanks, artillery rumbling along, with their caissons and limbers. A city in motion. 30,000 men in your corps. Alone, dust clouds mark your passage, visible for miles. Behind the fighting men comes the baggage train. Hundreds of wagons carrying ammunition, food, medical, supplies, officers' baggage, blacksmiths, surgeons, bakers, armorers. The small army of specialists needed to keep the main army functioning. And behind them the camp followers, wives who refuse to be left behind, laundresses, sellers selling wine and tobacco, women of negotiable virtue, even children born on previous campaigns. The daily routine is relentless. Drums wake you at 4 a.m. You've barely rolled your blanket before the order comes to march. The lucky ones get coffee. Most make do with water. Breakfast happens on the move. A chunk of bread torn from yesterday's ration, chewed as you walk. Knees high, backs straight. The sergeants patrol the column like sheepdogs barking at stragglers. The regiment's honor. Remember who you are. Each man carries 3 days' rations. Bread, salt, meat, dried vegetables that must be soaked to be edible. In theory, supply wagons meet. You with fresh provisions every 3rd day. In practice, the wagons often fail to appear. That's when foraging begins. Foraging is a polite military word for what civilians might call theft. Small parties detach from each company, spreading out to nearby farms and villages. They take what the army needs: food, fodder for horses, occasionally wine or brandy. Official policy says all goods must be paid for with promissory notes. Reality is messier. You're assigned to a foraging party on Your 8th day of the march. Corporal Bernard leads your group of 6 men to A, small farm 2 kilometers from a main road. The farmer meets you at the door, eyes hollow. He's seen armies before. What can you spare? Bernard asks not. Unkindly, the farmer's larder is already depleted. 3 chickens, half a wheel of cheese, some late cabbages from the garden. It's not enough for a company of 120 men, but Bernard accepts it without argument. He even writes out a proper receipt. The emperor insists on discipline. Not all foraging parties are so restrained. You hear stories. Farms stripped bare, wine cellars emptied, livestock slaughtered. The further the army moves from France, the worse the behavior becomes. The bonds of language and shared nationality no longer constrain the hungriest soldiers. The army system for feeding its men is impressive in theory. Each corps has its own supply administration with master, bakers, butchers, and commissary officers. When everything works perfectly, field bakeries produce thousands of bread rations daily. Mobile slaughter houses processed cattle driven alongside the army, but the sheer scale defies consistent execution. Hunger becomes your companion, not the sharp pangs of total starvation, not. Yet, but a constant gnawing emptiness. You learn to eat whatever's available, whenever it's available. Raw turnips pulled from fields, unripe fruit. Once, in desperation, your squad boils leather from an old pack to make soup. The Russians will be better veterans. Promise. The Russians are afraid of us. They'll leave their stores intact when they retreat. You soon discover the veterans are both right and wrong. The Russians do retreat before the inexorable advance of the Grand Army, but they don't leave anything behind. The policy of scorched earth leaves nothing but burned villages and poisoned wells. The hunger grows more insistent. Water brings its own challenges. Rivers and streams are quickly fouled when thousands of men and horses pass through. Dysentery spreads rapidly. Men weaken, falling out of the column despite the threats of sergeants. Many never catch up again. You learn to dip your canteen upstream from the main crossing points, to add wine or brandy when the water looks suspicious, to never ever drink from stagnant ponds. No matter how desperate your thirst, sleep becomes precious, rare treasure. Most nights bring only 5 hours of rest, less when on picket duty. The army makes camp late, usually well after sunset, and breaks camp before dawn. You learn to fall asleep instantly whenever opportunity presents, even standing up, during brief halts in the march. A soldier who can't sleep on a bed of rocks isn't a soldier yet. Michel tells you. He's just a tired civilian in uniform. Camp life develops its own peculiar rhythms. When the order comes to halt, for the night, organized chaos erupts. Regiments move to assigned positions. Engineers mark out defensive works if needed. Cavalry establishes outposts. And the infantry begins the nightly ritual of making camp. Tents are a luxury reserved for officers. Common soldiers sleep in the open when weather permits. When it doesn't, you make crude shelters from branches and greatcoats. For men to a shelter, spooned together for warmth, taking turns on the exposed edges. Fires bloom across the landscape as daylight fades. The army becomes a constellation of orange pinpoints in the darkness. Around these fires, the true culture of the army emerges. Men clean weapons while trading rumors and stories. Veterans boast of previous campaigns. Songs rise from different sections of the camp. French, German, Italian, Polish. Napoleon's army is as diverse as Europe itself. The food improves marginally when the army halts. Time to cook transforms even meager ingredients into something approaching palatability. Each mess group of 6 to 8 men pulls their rations. One soldier serves as cook using the squad's single pot to make soup or stew. On good days, there's meat. On average days, dried vegetables and bread. On bad days, whatever could be foraged. Best cook gets first portion, is the unwritten rule. It ensures no one deliberately ruins the communal meal. After dinner comes the true business of the army maintenance. Uniforms need mending. Muskets require cleaning. Each part disassembled, wiped clean of powder. Residue oiled, reassembled. Cartridges checked and counted. Shoes repaired with. Whatever materials are available. The veterans drill this routine into you until it becomes automatic. The Austrian who kills you won't be the one with the shiny bayonet. Bernard says it'll be the one whose musket actually fires when wet. These evenings also bring gambling. Cards and dice appear from hidden pockets. A month's pay can change hands in an hour. Officers officially discourage gambling, but participate themselves in their own circles. The smart soldiers avoid the games, sending their pay home or saving for small luxuries that make campaign life bearable. Tobacco, brandy, occasionally. Women. Hygiene deteriorates with each passing week. Lice infest everyone, regardless of rank. The tiny parasites cause constant itching interrupted only by sleep or battle. Soldiers develop a characteristic stance. Back against A. Tree, moving side to side to scratch without using their hands. The Emperor has 100,000 men, and 1 billion lice goes a common joke. The lice are winning. Bathing becomes a rare luxury, usually possible only when the army crosses suitable rivers. Even then, military necessity limits opportunities. Entire companies might be ordered into the water together. A brief reprieve from the filth before resuming the march. The relief lasts hours at most before sweat and dust rebuild their layers. Disease spreads inevitably. Dysentery transforms strong men into hollow-eyed shadows. Typhus arrives next, carried by the very lice that torment you. Fever cases multiply. The medical corps, surprisingly well organized under Napoleon's chief surgeon, Baron Larry, does what it can, but early 19th century medicine offers few effective treatments. Piss clear, march far becomes your squad's unofficial motto. Those whose urine turns dark or bloody soon find themselves in the ambulance wagons. Many never return to the ranks. You're lucky. A farm boy's constitution hardened by years of physical labor serves you well. You suffer the minor miseries, blisters, lice, occasional diarrhea from questionable water, but avoid the killers that thin the ranks without a shot being fired. Others aren't so fortunate. Your friend Claude, a tailor's apprentice from Lyon, collapses during a particularly grueling march. By nightfall, his fever rages so high that he no longer recognizes you. The surgeons take him. 3 days later, word filters back. Claude is dead, buried in an unmarked grave beside the road like hundreds before him. The army's composition changes subtly as you advance deeper into enemy territory. The weak are culled by illness, exhaustion in the first skirmishes. Those who remain grow leaner, harder. Civilian softness burns away completely. Even the gentlemen volunteers who joined, with romantic notions of glory, have transformed or disappeared. We're the best now, Michel says after 3 weeks on the march. The ones who couldn't hack it are gone. When we meet, the Austrians in force, they're going to themselves. Your first taste of combat comes unexpectedly. Your company is assigned to escort a foraging party, a larger one than usual, with wagons to carry grain from a mill near the river. The morning is misty, visibility limited to 100 yards at most. The column moves cautiously through rolling terrain. The crack of muskets shatters the quiet. Shots from the mist. Targets. Unseen. Men drop. The wagons halt in confusion. Officers shout contradictory. Orders. Your musket is loaded, but there's nothing to aim at. Skirmish line. 4th Company. Deployers, skirmishers, training takes over. Your company spreads out 5 paces between each man. Advance toward the firing. Your heart hammers so hard you're certain everyone can hear it. The taste of copper floods your mouth. Your hands tremble as you your musket. More shots. Closer. Now, through gaps in the mist, you glimpse green uniforms. Austrian Jaegers, light infantry, the enemy. You fire your first shot in anger. The musket kicks against your shoulder. Black powder smoke obscures your vision. Momentarily, you have no idea if you hit anything. Probably not. Combat veterans. Say it takes a 100 musket balls to kill one enemy soldier. The firefight lasts, perhaps 20 minutes. The Austrian skirmishers melt away as French cavalry appears on their flank. 4 men from your company are wounded, 1 dead. The mill is secured. The wagons fill with precious grain. A minor victory in a small action that won't even be recorded in the regiment's history. But you've crossed the threshold. You've seen the elephant, as the veterans say, fired at other men with intent to kill. Risk death yourself. Something fundamental has changed. You're a soldier now, truly and completely. That night, the veterans treat you differently. You've joined their brotherhood. They share wine, slap your back, include you in conversations. Previously closed are raw recruits. Not bad today. Bernard says the closest. Thing to praise you've heard from him. Next time, aim lower. Everyone shoots high their first battle. The army continues its relentless advance. Towns appear, are occupied briefly, then disappear behind you. You struggle to remember their foreign names. They blur together. Just places with a column. Pause, where you slept one night on cobblestones instead of dirt. Where perhaps you found a wall to shelter from. Rain. Somewhere in this advance, your perception of time changes. Days lose their individuality, marked only by growing distance from home. Future and past become less relevant than the immediate present. The next step, the next meal, the next hour of sleep, even. Letters from home, when they rarely arrive, seem to describe a world that no longer fully exists for you. The seasons shift. Summer heat gives way to autumn chill. Your great coat, once carried, rolled atop your pack and cursed for its weight, becomes your most treasured possession. As night temperatures drop, campfires burn longer. Men cluster closer. Winter's coming, the veterans mutter, better finish this business before snow. Napoleon drive the army hard, sensing the same race against. Weather, 30 kilometers becomes 35, sometimes 40. Men fall out in greater numbers. The column stretches longer as gaps appear. Stragglers form their own informal units. Following a day behind the main force, vulnerable to enemy cavalry and local partisans, you witness your first full-scale battle from a distance. Your division is held in reserve while other corps engage the Austrian main force. From a ridgeline, 2 kilometers away, you watch the spectacle unfold. Lines of infantry advance. Through smoke, cavalry charges crash against squares. Artillery batteries exchange fire. Solid shot plowing furrows through packed formations. The noise is like nothing you've imagined. A continuous roar punctuated by distinct cannon blasts. The ground literally trembles beneath your feet. The smoke grows so thick that much of the battlefield disappears from view. Officers relying on messengers to report developments they can no longer see. By day end, the Austrians retreat. The French pursue. Your division, fresh and unblooded, leads the advance. As you march across the battlefield, you receive your education in war's aftermath. The dead lie where they fell, already being stripped by battlefield scavengers, civilians and soldiers alike. The wounded cry out from all sides, too numerous for the medical services to collect quickly. The smell hits you like a physical blow. Blood, Voided bowels, black powder. Horses scream in a horribly human way until someone puts them out of their misery. Don't look, Michel advises. Just keep marching. But you do look. You need to understand what awaits you when your turn comes. The faces of the dead show every possible expression. Peace, surprise, agony, emptiness. French blue and Austrian white lie intermingled. Death makes no distinction between enemies. Your company bivouacs 3 kilometers beyond the battlefield. The wind mercifully blows from the west, carrying the smell away. From you as darkness falls, you can see lanterns moving among the fallen, surgery continuing through the night. Occasionally, distant screams reach you, and a limb is removed without sufficient brandy to dull the pain. Morning brings news of victory. The Austrians are in full retreat. The road to Vienna lies open. The emperor is pleased with the army's performance. Extra wine rations are distributed to celebrate. You accept your cup, draining it quickly. The warmth spreads through your chest, momentarily displacing the growing cold in your bones. You survive the march. Survive your first skirmish. Witness your first great battle. But something tells you to reel. Test still lies ahead. Rumors swirl through camp that evening. The Russians are coming. The Russians with their countless hordes. The Russians who have never been truly conquered. You check your musket again, counting your remaining cartridges. 42. Not enough if the stories about Russian numbers are true. You'll need more before the next battle. Much more. The night before a major battle has a peculiar feeling. A strange electric. Tension hangs in the air. Men speak more quietly than usual. Some write letters home. Others sleep with unusual soundness, as if their bodies instinctively gather rest before exertion. Many simply stare into campfires, lost in private thoughts. You sit with your squad methodically checking your equipment for tomorrow. Musket cleaned and loaded. 60 cartridges in your cartridge box. Bayonet sharpened on a whetstone borrowed from the company blacksmith. Canteen filled with water mixed with a splash of brandy. For courage. Michel says don't waste time reloading if they charge. Bernard advises, not for first time, use the bayonet. It's faster, and it scares them more. Captain Gerard visits each squad personally, a rare occurrence that underscores tomorrow's importance. He's a good officer, not brilliant perhaps, but competent and relatively careful with his men's lives. The soldiers respect him for it. Big day tomorrow, boys, he says simply. The Emperor himself will be watching. The 57th has never let him down before. Sleep comes fitfully, if at all. You doze, then wake suddenly, convinced the drums are beating assembly. False alarm. The camp remains quiet, except for the challenges of centuries and the moans of the sick. Eventually, you give up and simply wait for dawn, fingering the small wooden cross your mother pressed into your hand when you left home. The drums begin at 4, though the eastern sky shows only the faintest lightning. The army stirs to life with practiced efficiency. No fires are permitted. The army will march cold and hungry to preserve the element of surprise. You form ranks in darkness, guided by sergeants with lanterns. By dawn, the entire corps, nearly 30,000 men, is moving forward in attack columns. From your position in the ranks, you can see little except the backs of men in front of you. Occasional gaps in the formation reveal glimpses of the battlefield, a vast open plain with scattered woods and small villages. Perfect ground for Napoleon's style of warfare. The first artillery exchange begins, while you're still 3 kilometers from the enemy lines. The Russian guns are heavy, 12, and 24-pounders that send solid iron balls screaming overhead. French batteries respond immediately, their own fire concentrated on specific targets, rather than spread across the line. The emperor uses artillery like a boxer uses his fists. Michel had explained once. He doesn't jab everywhere. He picks a spot and hammers it until it breaks. Your column continues its advance, now angled slightly leftward based on signals from staff officers galloping along the formation. The ground shakes beneath your feet from continuous artillery barrage. Black smoke drifts across the field, obscuring sections of the line. The first casualties occur, even before you see the enemy. A Russian round shot plows through your battalion's left flank company, knocking down 8 men like bowling pins. The column barely hesitates, closing ranks. Automatically, the wounded who can walk stagger toward the rear. The others remain where they fell. The battlefield surgeons will find them later. Maybe at 800 m from the Russian line, your regiment deploys from column into line. Formation. It's a complex maneuver practiced hundreds of times in training. Companies wheel and slide into position, transforming the narrow, deep column into a wide, shallow line just 3 men. Deep, perfect for delivering maximum firepower. Steady men dress the line, officers. Shout, using their swords to ensure perfect alignment. Even under fire, the regiment maintains its precision. Napoleon's infantry may not match British discipline in line tactics, but they're still professionals. Now you can see the enemy clearly for the first time. The Russian infantry stands in dark green masses, their artillery positioned on small rises. Behind them, their famous cavalry, Cossacks and Hussars, wait on the flanks. You estimate 10,000 men in this section of their line alone. The French advance continues at a measured pace. No running, no disorder. The drum major sets the cadence, the familiar rhythm. Steadying nervous feet. Left, right. 76 paces per minute, exactly as in training. At 400 m, the Russian infantry opens fire. Their first volley is high, most balls passing harmlessly overhead with an angry buzzing sound like giant hornets. A few fine targets. Men drop. The line closes once more. Hold fire. Captain Gerard shouts. Wait for the order. The next Russian volley is better aimed. More Frenchmen fall. Still your regiment holds its fire, closing the distance with mechanical precision. The Russians manage a third ragged volley before your line halts at 100. Battalion, make ready. 2,000 muskets. Come to position. The first rank kneeling. Take aim. Muskets level. Each man picking his target in the Russian line. Fire. The crash is deafening. 2,000 muskets discharge simultaneously, sending a storm of lead into the Russian infantry. The effect is devastating. Entire sections of their line disappear in the smoke. Dozens of men falling from that concentrated blow. There's no time to observe the damage. You're already reloading automatically. Fingers performing the practice motions. Bite cartridge, prime pan, charge barrel, ram, ball, return ramrod. The taste of gunpowder fills your mouth. Gritty and bitter. Second rank. Make ready. Take aim. Fire. Another crash as the second rank delivers its volley. Then the third rank. Then back to first. The regiment maintains a continuous rolling. Fire. Each rank shooting in sequence. The Russians respond in kind. The space between the armies fills with smoke, so thick you can barely see 50 m. You lose track of time. Load, fire, load, fire. The barrel of your musket becomes 2. Hot to touch near the muzzle. Sweat pours down your face, cutting tracks of the powder residue, blackening your skin. Your right shoulder throbs from the musket's recoil. Around you, men fall constantly. A ball strikes the soldier to your right, entering his chest with sound like a melon being thumped. He looks surprised more than anything else. Coughs once, then collapses, there's no time to help him. The man behind steps forward to take his place. The noise is indescribable. A constant roar punctuated by individual cannon shots and officer shouts. Through it all, the drums maintain their beat, providing the central rhythm that holds a regiment together. After perhaps 30 minutes of this exchange, something changes in the Russian line. Their fire slackens. Gaps appear in their formation. They're wavering. Someone shouts. Forward. Incredibly, the regiment begins to advance again. Still firing. The Russians break, not in a panicked rout, but controlled withdrawal, moving back 200 m to a new position where they reform. The French follow cautiously, maintaining their line. A staff officer gallops up to your battalion, shouting something to the colonel. Moments later, orders spread down the line. Form square. Form square. Cavalry approaching. This is a nightmare scenario for infantry, caught in line formation. When enemy cavalry attacks, the regiment reacts instantly. Companies wheeling inward to form a hollow square, ranks deep on all sides. Bayonets project, outward like a porcupine's quills. You find yourself in the front rank of the square's rear face. Kneel first rank fix. Bayonets. You drop to one knee, plant your musket but against the ground, and angle the bayonet outward at horse chest height. The three ranks behind you will fire over your head when the time comes. The Russian cavalry appears through the smoke, heavy cuirassiers and gleaming breastplates, sabers held high. The earth trembles under hundreds of hooves. The noise of their approach is like an avalanche. Hold steady, the colonel shouts. Wait for the command. The instinct to run is nearly overwhelming. 1,000 kgs of horse, an armored man charging directly at you, tests courage like nothing else. Some men break, trying to push their way into the square center. Sergeants beat them back into line with the flat of their swords. Third and fourth ranks present. Fire. Muskets crack just above your head. The concussion ringing your ears. The Russian cavalry charge falters as dozens of riders fall, but the momentum carries. The rest forward. They crash against the square like waves against a cliff. A horse looms directly before you, its rider slashing down with his saber. Your bayonet catches the horse in the chest. The animal screams, a horribly human sound, and rears backward, unseating its rider. The man falls almost at your feet. Before he can rise, the soldier beside you drives his bayonet into the Russian's throat. The cavalry swirls around the square, probing for weaknesses, cutting down any man who breaks formation. Finding no entry point, they eventually withdraw to regroup. The square holds. Reform line comes the order once the horsemen have retreated beyond charging distance. Resume advance. This cycle repeats throughout the day. Advance in line. Exchange fire. Form square against cavalry. Reform line. The regiment moves forward in a series of bloody increments, leaving a trail of dead and wounded behind. By mid-afternoon, your cartridge box is almost empty. Your ears ring so badly, you can barely hear orders. Your arms ache from reloading. Your face is completely black from powder residue. You've fired so many times that you're right. Thumb is raw and bleeding from flipping open the musket's frizzen. But the Russians are finally breaking. Their withdrawal becomes less orderly. Gaps in. Their line widen. The French sense victory and press harder. Napoleon commits his reserves. The Imperial Guard held back until this crucial moment. The magnificent bearskin-wearing grenadiers march forward in perfect order. Their appearance alone often enough to break enemy resistance. The Guard is committed, passes down the line. Victory is ours. A great cheer rises from the French army. The Russians accelerate their retreat. abandoning artillery pieces they can no longer withdraw. Cossacks cover their withdrawal, darting in to harass any French units that advance. Too eagerly. By sunset, the field belongs to the French. The Russians have retreated 5 kilometers to a new defensive line. They've lost perhaps 8,000 men and 30 cannon. French losses are similar, though as the victors, they hold the field and can recover their wounded. Now comes the battle's grim aftermath. With firing ceased, the full extent of the day's carnage becomes apparent. The ground between the original lines is carpeted with dead and wounded from both armies. The injured cry out for water, for their mothers, for death to end their suffering. Your regiment establishes bivouac a kilometer behind your final position. Too exhausted to construct proper shelters. Most men simply drop where they stand. You've been on your feet for 16 hours, engaged, in combat for 10 of them. Your body has nothing left to give, but rest doesn't come immediately. First, there's roll call. Each company accounts for its losses. Your company began the day with 112 men. Only 74 answer when their names are called. Some of the missing 38 are dead, others wounded and evacuated. Few simply disappeared in the chaos, deserted, captured, or wandering lost behind Russian lines. Captain Gerard looks a decade older than he did that morning. His uniform is torn and blood-stained, though he himself appears unwounded. He says little during roll call, merely nodding as each surviving man answers. Night brings a battlefield. Scavengers, official and unofficial. Stretcher parties from the medical corps search for wounded. Burial details begin the impossible task of interring thousands of dead before disease spreads, and the camp followers emerge to strip the dead of anything valuable. Coins, watches, boots, even teeth to be made into dentures. You witness a more organized form of looting as well. Each regiment sends parties to recover equipment from the fallen. Muskets, cartridge boxes, canteens. The army can replace men more easily than material. The medical situation is nightmarish. French military medicine under Napoleon is actually advanced for its time. Baron Larry's flying ambulances, horse-drawn, carts that retrieve wounded directly from the battlefield are a genuine innovation. The French Medical Corps practices triage, prioritizing those most likely to survive if treated quickly, but the system becomes overwhelmed in major battles. There are simply too many wounded for the available surgeons. Makeshift hospitals appear in every building for kilometers around. Churches, barns, private homes commandeered for the purpose. The screams from these improvised surgical theaters continue through the night. You're fortunate to have escaped serious injury. A spent musk ball bruised your left thigh, and a near miss from a cannonball showered you with dirt and small stones, leaving shallow cuts on your face. Nothing that requires a surgeon's attention. Others weren't so. Lucky, Michel took a ball through his left arm. Painful, but not life-threatening if infection doesn't set in. Bernard escaped completely unscathed, as did Captain Gerard. But Lieutenant Rousseau lost both legs to a cannonball and died before reaching a surgeon. Sergeant Dupont simply disappeared, presumably killed, but with no body. Recovered. The randomness of it all strikes you as you finally lie down to rest. No correlation between skill and survival. The most experienced veteran might fall to a stray ball fired by a first-day recruit. The greenest soldier might emerge unscathed from the thickest fighting. In battle, luck matters more than anything. Morning reveals the battlefield in harsh daylight, what seemed merely chaotic end. The heat of combat now appears obscene. Bodies contorted and impossible. Positions, blood darkening to black on churned earth. Abandoned equipment, scattered like a child's discarded toys. The sweet, sour smell of death already, rising despite the cool air. Your regiment spends a day recovering, reorganizing, and preparing to march again. Survivors are consolidated into new companies. Ammunition is redistributed. Rations arrive. The first, proper food since before the battle. The Army's efficiency is remarkable. Within 24 hours of major combat, it's nearly ready to resume operations. Orders arrive with the evening meal. The Army will advance at dawn, pursuing the retreating Russians. No rest, no time to process what you've experienced. The campaign continues. That night, you write a brief letter home. You don't mention the fighting or the dead. Instead, you describe the countryside, the weather, the exotic foods you've tried. You ask about the harvest, about your sisters, about the village gossip, a pretense of normality that feels increasingly foreign. As you seal the letter, which may or may not ever reach its destination, you realize something has fundamentally changed. The young farmer's son, who was conscripted months ago, no longer exists. In his place is someone harder, someone who has seen and done things a civilian self could never imagine. You're a soldier now, truly and completely, for better or worse. The regiment forms in darkness the next morning, as it has so many times before. But the formation has changed. Gaps in, the ranks where familiar faces once stood. New officers for companies that lost their leaders. The physical structure of the Army adapts even as its purpose remains constant. Forward, always forward. The campaign continues. The Russians retreat, but they're not broken. They trade space for time, drawing the Grand Army deeper into their territory. Some veterans begin to mutter concerns about supply lines stretching too thin, about the approaching autumn, about the vastness of Russia itself. But such strategic concerns are beyond your scope. Your world has narrowed to immediate concerns. The next march, the next meal, the next battle, one foot in front of the other, one day at a time. Survival. Dawn breaks as the regiment moves out, revealing a road stretching eastward toward Moscow. The rising sun casts long shadows behind the marching columns. Somewhere ahead, the Russians are preparing their next stand. Somewhere ahead, another battlefield awaits. You check your cartridge box, refilled with 60 fresh rounds. You adjust your pack, settling the weight more comfortably on your shoulders. Your musket rests familiarly against your arm, no longer an awkward burden, but an extension of yourself. The drums beat their steady rhythm. Left foot, right foot into Russia, into whatever fate awaits. The Russian summer hits like an unexpected enemy. Heat shimmers above. The dusty roads, turning the horizon liquid. Sweat soaks your uniform, crusting it with salt stains. Your lips crack from dehydration. The temperature inside your shako feels hot enough to bake bread. This wasn't in the recruitment speech. Jokes a soldier from Marseilles, supposedly accustomed to heat. Even he struggles as the thermometer climbs past 35 degrees. Water becomes more precious than gold. Wells along the route are sabotaged, filled with dead animals or human waste. Rivers provide relief when available, but the Army moves too quickly to linger. Canteens empty within hours of filling. Men drink from puddles, from hoofprints filled with stagnant water, from ditches shared with livestock. The results are predictable. Dysentery sweeps through the ranks. Men march with soiled breeches, unable to leave formation despite their misery. The stronger ones continue forward on willpower alone. The weaker collapse by the roadside, left to follow with the stragglers or die where they fall. You survive by remembering farm wisdom. Chew bread slowly to produce saliva. Rinse your mouth with water before swallowing to maximize the sensation. Wrap a damp cloth around your neck. Small tricks that mean the difference between marching on and falling behind. The Russians remain elusive, They retreat before the Grand Army's advance, refusing decisive battle. Small Cossack units harass your flanks, striking. Supply wagons and isolated detachments before vanishing into the vastness of the landscape. It's warfare by 1,000 cuts, bleeding the French army without, risking major engagement. More troubling still is the scorched earth policy. Villages stand empty, stripped of food and fodder. Grain, fields burn on the horizon. Livestock disappears. The Russians destroy anything that might sustain the invaders, accepting their own people suffering as the price of strategic advantage. They're burning their own country. Captain Gerard says in disbelief as you pass yet another smoldering village. What kind of people do that? Smart ones, replies Bernard. The sergeant has developed a grudging respect for Russian tactics. They know we can't bring enough supplies for 500,000 men. Either we starve or we go. Home. Supply becomes the army's greatest challenge. The wagons struggle to keep pace as the advance lengthens. Roads deteriorate under the traffic of thousands of men, horses, and vehicles. Distances stretch beyond the original planning estimates. Food rations shrink from adequate to minimal to starvation. Levels. The Russians will be beaten before Moscow, Napoleon allegedly tells his generals. Whether from genuine belief or necessity, the army continues its relentless push eastward. Your regiment is fortunate compared to many. Colonel Munn understands logistics better than most. He establishes rotating foraging parties, assigns men, specifically to locate water sources, and strictly regulates consumption. Miraculously, the 57th maintains almost 80% strength, while other regiments dwindle to half their original numbers. Borodino changes everything. After months of retreat, the Russians finally turn to fight just 125 kilometers from Moscow. On September 7th, 1812, the armies clash in what will become the bloodiest single day of the Napoleonic Wars. Your regiment forms part of Marshal Davout's corps on the flank. The objective, capture the bag-ration flèches, 3 arrow-shaped earthworks protecting the Russian line. The battle begins at dawn with a familiar artillery bombardment, but at an unprecedented scale. Over 1,000 cannons fire simultaneously, creating a continuous thunder that makes the ground vibrate beneath your feet. The fighting defies description. Ranks advance through smoke, so thick you can barely see the man beside you. The Russians defend with suicidal determination, counterattacking each time the French seize ground. Men grapple hand to hand in the earthworks, using bayonets, musket butts, even bare hands when weapons break. By day's end, the French hold the field, but at catastrophic cost. Your company entered battle with 68 men. 23 survived unwounded. Captain Gerard is dead, his body unrecoverable and confused, fighting around the central flesh. Michel loses his remaining arm and bleeds to death before reaching a surgeon. Even the seemingly invincible Bernard takes a ball through the thigh, though he refuses evacuation. The overall casualties stagger the imagination. The French suffer around 30,000 dead and wounded. Russian losses approach 45,000. The narrow ridge where the heaviest fighting occurred disappears entirely beneath a carpet of bodies. The wounded lie where they fell, too numerous for the medical services to collect quickly. Their screams continue through the night, gradually diminishing as death claims the most severely injured. Victory feels hollow. The Russians retreat in good order rather than collapse. Their army remains intact, if diminished, and the Grand Army is now a shadow of the force that crossed the Neman River in June. Disease, starvation, and combat have reduced its strength by over half. The survivors are exhausted, undernourished, and increasingly doubtful of ultimate success. But Moscow beckons just 7 days' march away. Surely they're in Russia's ancient capital. The campaign will reach its successful conclusion. Peace will be negotiated. Supplies will be plentiful. The sacrifices will prove worthwhile. The reality proves cruelly different. Your first glimpse of Moscow comes on September 14th. The city appears on the horizon like a mirage. Hundreds of towers and domes gleaming in the autumn sunlight. After months of hardship, the sight revives flagging spirits. Surely, such a magnificent prize justifies all suffering. But as the vanguard enters the city, disturbing reports filter back. Moscow is nearly empty. Its population of 270,000 has vanished, leaving only a few thousand behind. There is no delegation to surrender the keys to the city. No officials to negotiate, just silence and abandonment. That night, the fires begin. Whether by Russian design or French carelessness, flames erupt across the city. The predominantly wooden structures burn with terrifying speed. By the second day, nearly two-thirds of Moscow is ablaze. The heat becomes so intense that regiments camped in the central squares must withdraw to the outskirts. The sky turns, black with smoke, then orange with reflected firelight. Your company shelters in an abandoned church on the city's western edge, watching the apocalyptic scene unfold. The stone building remains cool despite the inferno consuming surrounding structures. For the first time in months, you sleep on a floor instead of bare ground. It feels like unimaginable luxury. The fires burn for 5 days before gradually subsiding. What remains is a blackened shelter without sustenance. The Russians had evacuated food stores and destroyed what couldn't be moved. Even the vodka warehouses were emptied. Moscow offers roof but no bread, protection but no provisions. Napoleon establishes his headquarters in the Kremlin, which largely escaped the flames. He waits for Russian overtures of peace. Days pass, then weeks. No communication arrives. Meanwhile, autumn deepens. Temperatures drop. Frosts appear in early October. We can't win here. Veterans mutter around. Campfires. Not without supplies. Not with the Russians still in the field. The emperor seemingly reaches the same conclusion. On October 19th, after 5 weeks in Moscow, the order spreads throughout the army. Prepare to withdraw. The Grand Army will return to friendly territory, establishing winter quarters in Lithuania and Poland before, resuming the campaign in spring. What no one yet realizes is that they're already too late. The retreat begins orderly enough. The army departs Moscow in reasonable condition, carrying what supplies could be salvaged from the ruins. Napoleon attempts a southward route to pass through unspoiled territory. But Russian resistance forces the French back onto the same road they took during the advance, a path already stripped of resources months earlier. Weather remains mild initially. Daytime temperatures hover above freezing. Nights are cold but survivable. The first snows fall in early November. Light dustings that melt by midday. Veterans from northern departments dismiss them as inconsequential. Those from southern France and Italy regard the white precipitation with greater concern. Their concern proves justified. On November 6th, winter arrives in earnest. The temperature plummets to minus 20 degrees C. Snow falls continuously for 30 hours, accumulating knee deep on the roads. Overnight, the strategic retreat transforms into a desperate struggle for survival. Nothing in your experience has prepared you for such cold. Your breath freezes. In your beard, forming ice crystals that clink as you move. The metal parts of your musket stick to bare skin, tearing flesh when pulled away. Your great coat, designed for European autumn rather than Russian winter, provides minimal protection against a relentless wind. Keep moving, Bernard rasps, his voice barely audible through his frozen mustache. The sergeant's leg wound has partially healed, though he walks with pronounced limp. Stop moving. You die. It's that simple. He's right. Men who sit to rest never rise again. They're found the next morning frozen solid in lifelike postures, sometimes still clutching letters or small keepsakes. The road becomes lined with these human statues, macabre signposts marking the army's passage. Frostbite claims extremities with terrifying speed. Fingers and toes turn black within hours of exposure. Noses and ears follow. The lucky ones reach field hospitals where surgeons amputate the gangrenous flesh before infection spreads. The unlucky, the vast majority, simply endure, watching pieces of themselves die and fall away. Starvation compounds a misery. Supply, wagons bogged down in snow or abandoned when horses died. Foraging parties find nothing in the already stripped countryside. Men resort to increasingly desperate measures. Horse meat becomes the primary sustenance, consumed raw when fire materials can't be found. When horses themselves become scarce, soldiers turn to boiling leather equipment to extract minimal nutrition. You witness men fighting to death over a dead raven. Others scrape bark from trees, chewing the bitter inner layers for hours to extract microscopic sustenance. A few resort to cutting flesh from the recently dead, an unspeakable taboo that nonetheless occurs with increasing frequency as rational thought gives way to animal hunger. Discipline collapses throughout much of the army. Regiments that once maneuvered with precision on parade grounds now resemble shuffling mobs. Men discard equipment that might slow their progress. First non-essentials, then weapons themselves. Only the Imperial Guard maintains substantial cohesion, their distinctive uniform still visible amid the chaos. Your own regiment survives better than most, primarily through Bernard's leadership. After Captain Gerard's death at Borodino, no replacement officer reached the company. The sergeant, now acting lieutenant by necessity, if not rank, enforces brutal but effective survival measures. Stay together, share food equally. No, man marches alone. His rules are simple, but salvation for those who obey. Of the 23 unwounded who left Borodino, 18 remain alive by mid-November, an almost miraculous survival rate in the circumstances. The retreating army passes the Borodino battlefield in early November. The dead from September still lie exposed, preserved by the cold, their uniforms and equipment long since stripped by scavengers. It's a grim preview of what awaits those who fall behind now. Cossacks shadow the retreat, attacking stragglers and isolated groups. They rarely engage the main column directly, preferring to pick off the vulnerable. French soldiers who surrender are sometimes stripped naked and left to freeze. The knowledge eliminates surrender as an option for most. Russian regular forces harass the retreat as well, pressing close enough to necessitate rear guard actions. These engagements become increasingly one-sided as French artillery and cavalry diminish to insignificance. Infantry alone remains in meaningful numbers, and even they struggle to maintain combat effectiveness with frozen muskets and weakened bodies. The Nadia comes at the Berezina River in late November. The Russians have destroyed all bridges, trapping the French against a partially frozen waterway. Marshal Victor's rear guard fights desperately to hold back pursuing forces while engineers construct makeshift pontoon bridges from local timber. The crossing becomes a nightmare beyond imagination. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians crowd the eastern bank, fighting to reach the bridges. Order disintegrates completely. Strong men trample the weak. Friends who marched together for months now abandon each other in the frenzied push to escape. The bridges themselves, hastily constructed from green wood, groan under the weight. One partially collapses mid-crossing, sending hundreds into the freezing water. Their screams last only moments before the cold silences them forever. Your company crosses relatively intact, Bernard having positioned you to move at first light before the worst congestion. You watch from the western bank as the situation deteriorates hour by hour. By afternoon, the approaches to bridges disappear beneath a writhing mass of humanity. By evening, Russian artillery finds the range dropping rounds directly into the densest crowds. The French rear guard holds until the last possible moment, then attempts their own crossing under direct fire. Perhaps half make it. The rest die at the riverbank or surrender, their ammunition exhausted and position untenable. When the last French troops clear the western bank on November 29th, engineers burn the bridges to slow pursuit. Thousands of civilians and stragglers remain trapped on the eastern side, their fate sealed, their cries for help gradually fade as you march westward. No one looks back. The Berezina marks the effective end of the Grand Army as a fighting force. What remains is a column of ghosts, men animated solely by the instinct to reach safety. Fewer than 40,000 troops from the original 500,000 still march in formation. Another 40,000 stragglers follow in disorganized bands. The rest lie buried in Russian soil or wander as prisoners. December brings even colder temperatures, reaching minus 30 degrees Celsius. Men die by the hundreds each night, their bodies left where they fall as the column shuffles onward. The survivors develop 1,000 stare, their gazes fixed on some middle distance. Minds retreated to inner sanctums where current reality can't fully penetrate. You march westward through this frozen hell, one foot mechanically following, the other. Your toes are numb, possibly already dead, but you dare not remove your boots to check. Your face is wrapped in strips torn from your spare shirt, leaving only your eyes exposed. Frost forms on your eyelashes, occasionally freezing your eyes shut until body heat melts it. Food exists now only as memory. You haven't eaten in 3 days, not since the last horse from your company was slaughtered and distributed in carefully measured portions. Water comes from snow melted in your mouth, the cold burning your gums, but providing essential hydration. Bernard still leads, though his commands have reduced to basic instructions. Keep moving, stay awake, march west. The sergeant seems indestructible, a force of nature rather than mere flesh. When 2 men from another company try to steal your remaining food, he kills both with his belt knife. His movements, economical despite exhaustion and hunger. The first friendly outposts appear in mid-December. Lithuanian villages still under nominal French control. The remaining troops stagger into these havens, collapsing beside fires, consuming whatever food is available. Many die from eating too quickly after prolonged starvation, their bodies rejecting sudden nourishment. For those who survive, the worst is over. Supply depots established during the advance still function in major towns. Fresh troops arrive from Western Europe, shocked by the condition of the veterans they encounter. Medical services overwhelmed by frostbite and exposure cases. Established triage protocols that condemn the most severely injured to palliative care only. Your regiment, now a company-sized formation, reaches Vilnius on December 24th. The city appears impossibly civilized after months in the field. Stone buildings, glass windows, food markets, women in clean dresses. The contrast with recent experience creates cognitive dissonance, as if you've awakened from a particularly vivid nightmare. Bernard secures lodging in a tannery storeroom. The space is warm, the floor covered with straw. The owner provides soup and black bread in exchange for protecting his property from looters. It's the first time you slept indoors since Moscow, the first decent meal in weeks. That night as Christmas Eve, bells ring across the city. You examine yourself in a broken mirror found among discarded equipment. A stranger stares back. Skeletal face, patchy beard, crusted with ice and dirt, eyes sunken into dark ring sockets, uniform in, tatters held together with string and wire. Merry Christmas, Bernard says, raising a cup of water brandy. His toast contains no joy, only recognition, of survival against impossible odds. You touch your cup to his, the closest thing, to celebration possible in the circumstances. Outside, snow continues falling on a broken army. The Russian campaign has failed catastrophically. Napoleon himself has abandoned the retreat, racing ahead to Paris to raise new armies and contain the political damage. Those who staggered back from Moscow are the merest remnant of the grand army that crossed the Neman with such confidence months earlier. But you're alive somehow, against all probability. You survived what will be remembered as one of history's most disastrous military campaigns. The cost has been beyond calculation, not just in lives, but in humanity itself. Things witnessed and done that can never be shared with those who weren't there. As you drift toward sleep, your thoughts turn to spring and the campaign that will inevitably follow. The war continues. The emperor will demand more blood, more sacrifice, and you will give it, not from patriotism or glory, but because the army has become your only home. These hollow-dyed survivors, your only family. The bells continue their cheerful pealing. The sound in, congruously festive amid such desolation. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but for tonight, at least you rest in relative safety. One of the few who live to tell the tale of Napoleon's Russian campaign. Winter light filters through the grimy window of your temporary quarters in Vilnius. The January sun offers illumination without warmth. Much like the emperor's latest proclamation posted throughout the city, Napoleon, now safely back in Paris, declares the Russian campaign a strategic withdrawal rather than a defeat. The dead, hundreds of thousands, go unmentioned. Bernard reads the proclamation aloud to the 7 surviving members of your company, his voice flat and emotionless. No one comments when he finishes. What is there to say? Those who walk through hell know the truth regardless of official narratives. Recovery proceeds slowly. Your frostbitten toes, 3 on your left, foot 2 on your right, turn black and eventually fall off. A relatively minor injury compared to many. Some men lose entire feet. Others are noses or ears. The luckiest suffer only fingers expendable appendages in peacetime occupations. Food remains your primary focus. After prolonged starvation, your body craves constant nourishment. The army provides basic rations now. Bread, beans, occasional meat, but never enough to satisfy the deep hunger that seems permanent. You trade anything of value for extra food, your spare shirt, your good boots, even your bayonet. Technically a punishable offense, but overlooked in the chaos of reorganization. Keep your musket, Bernard advises as he watches these transactions. Spring will come, and with it, another campaign. He's right, of course. The disaster in Russia has emboldened Napoleon's enemies. Prussia declares war in February. Austria seems likely to follow. Britain continues funding any nation willing to fight France. The emperor requires soldiers now more than ever, and surviving veterans, however damaged, are too valuable to discharge. Orders arrive in late January. All able-bodied men are proceed to Königsberg, where the army is reassembling. Those too injured for immediate service will convalesce in local hospitals before rejoining their units. The truly incapacitated man, missing limbs or suffering severe frostbite, will return to France as invalids. You fall into the first category, despite your missing toes. Walking remains painful but possible. The frozen stumps have healed into strange rounded nubs that throb constantly. You develop a rolling gait to minimize pressure on the damaged areas. It's ungainly but functional. The journey to Königsberg takes place in relative comfort compared to recent experiences. The army provides wagons for equipment, sparing soldiers from carrying full packs. Villages along the route have been instructed to provide lodging and food. The bitter cold continues, but shelter each night makes it survivable. Bernard remains your de facto leader, though he's never received official promotion. The sergeant's organizational skills prove invaluable during the transition. He secures better quarters than most, arranges extra rations through connections with supply officers, and shield his men from the worst duties during reorganization. They'll make me lieutenant when they need warm bodies to lead attacks, he says with grim humor. Until then, I'm happy without the extra target on my chest. Königsberg presents us a real contrast to the nightmare of the retreat. The Prussian city functions normally despite the military occupation. Shops open daily. Women promenade along boulevards. Theaters perform comedies and light operas. Life continues as if the frozen corpses lining the road from Moscow were merely a disturbing dream. The army's reconstitution proceeds with remarkable efficiency, a testament to Napoleonic administration. New recruits arrive daily, young conscripts with unlined faces and unmarked bodies. They regard the Russian veterans with a mixture of awe and horror. Your gaunt frame, missing toes, and thousand stare make you seem like creatures from another world. Were the Russians really cannibals? One fresh-faced boy from Toulouse asks as you clean your musket in the barracks. The Russians weren't the cannibals. You reply flatly. The boy doesn't ask follow-up questions. Interaction between veterans and new recruits remains minimal by mutual, unspoken agreement. You have nothing to say that they could comprehend. They have nothing to offer except painful reminders of your own lost innocence. Only necessity will bridge this divide. The necessity of combat where experience means survival. February passes in rebuilding and retraining. Your company now reinforced to 60 men. Drills daily, teaching the recruits basic maneuvers and musket handling. The veterans perform these exercises mechanically, muscle memory undiminished by physical deterioration. The new men struggle with the weight of equipment and complexity of formations. They'll learn fast once the shooting starts. Bernard observes dispassionately. The slow learners don't last long enough to become problems. March brings spring's first tentative appearance. Snow recedes from south-facing slopes. Ice breaks on the river. Birds return from winter migrations. Your body begins to recover some of its former strength as regular meals restore lost muscle mass. The nightmares vivid. Dreams of the Berezina crossing, or the Moscow fires become less frequent. Orders arrive with the thaw. The 57th Regiment will march west to join Marshal Ney's 3rd Corps near Magdeburg. The new campaign season approaches. Napoleon has raised another army, smaller than the Grand Army of 1812, but substantial nonetheless. France's seemingly inexhaustible manpower continues to amaze its enemies. The march to Magdeburg passes through countryside, showing increasing signs of hostility. Prussian villages provide required supplies, but without the enthusiasm once shown to French forces. Doors close as the column passes. Women shield children from view. Men watch, with barely concealed hatred from shadows. They smell blood in the water. Bernard comments after a particularly cold reception. Russia showed them the emperor isn't invincible. The 3rd Corps assembles near Magdeburg in late March. Approximately 40,000 men, under Marshal Ney's command. Your regiment forms part of General Souham's 8th Division, a formation comprised primarily of veteran units. The division's mission becomes clear during initial briefings. You will serve as a Corps Heavy Infantry, deployed where fighting will be fiercest. Napoleon's strategy for 1813 emerges through orders and preparations. Despite catastrophic losses in Russia, the Emperor plans an offensive campaign. Allied forces, now including Russia, Prussia and Sweden are organizing in northern Germany. The French will strike before this coalition reaches full strength, seeking to defeat each army in detail before they can combine. Same old Napoleon, a veteran artillery sergeant, comments during an evening meal share with infantry and NCOs, always looking for the decisive battle, always gambling everything on one throw. His tone makes clear this isn't entirely a compliment. The Russian campaign has bred a new cynicism among survivors, a questioning previously unthinkable in the Grand Army. They will fight. They have no choice. But the unquestioning faith in Napoleon's infallibility has died somewhere on the road from Moscow. April brings the campaign's first battles. The French advance rapidly through Saxony, winning several minor engagements against Prussian forces. Your regiment participates in the Battle of Lutzen on May 2nd, a hard-fought French victory that demonstrates both the army's resilience and its weaknesses. The most glaring deficiency is cavalry. The horses lost in Russia cannot be quickly replaced, leaving Napoleon without adequate reconnaissance and pursuit capabilities. Infantry and artillery must carry a heavier burden, resulting in higher casualties. Your own experience at Lutzen differs significantly from previous battles. As a veteran, you're now positioned in the rear rank, responsible for steadying new recruits and maintaining formation integrity. Bernard, finally promoted to lieutenant after 3 sergeants die in a single artillery barrage, leads with a cold efficiency that inspires confidence, if not affection. The battle's aftermath reveals both victory and concerning signs. The French hold the field, but Prussian morale remains unbroken. The enemy retreats in good order rather than disintegrating as in previous campaigns. They're new volunteers, men fighting for national liberation rather than royal ambition, show surprising determination for inexperienced troops. They're fighting for their homes now. Bernard observes as your company bivouacs on the battlefield. Always harder to beat a man defending his own doorstep. The campaign continues through spring and into summer. Battles blur together. Bautzen, Dresden, Leipzig. The massive engagement at Leipzig in October proves particularly costly. Over 600,000 men participate across 3 days of fighting, making it the largest battle in European history to that point. The French ultimately retreat, their strategic position in Germany untenable. Through these battles, your perspective gradually shifts from participant to observer. You perform your duties competently, loading, firing, advancing when ordered, but with emotional detachment. The fear that once accompanied combat has disappeared, replaced by a fatalistic acceptance. You will live or die by chance, not skill. The understanding brings a strange tranquility. You've got the veteran's eyes now. Bernard tells you after Leipzig as the army retreats toward the Rhine, seeing everything, feeling nothing. He's not entirely correct. You still feel not fear, but a deep weariness that permeates bone and spirit. Each battle, each march, each bivouac in muddy fields extracts something vital that never fully replenishes. By late 1813, you're running on fumes, animated by habit rather than purpose. The Allied pursuit continues relentlessly. French forces fight rear, guard actions across Germany, then into France itself as the war finally reaches home territory. Napoleon performs miracles of generalship during the 1814 campaign, defeating larger forces through brilliant maneuvering. But even genius has limitations. The emperor simply lacks sufficient men to hold back the combined armies of Europe. Paris falls on March 30th, 1814. Napoleon abdicates days later, accepting exile to Elba. The Bourbon monarchy returns to France after 22 years. The seemingly endless wars appear concluded at last. For soldiers, the transition proves complex The new government cannot maintain Napoleon's massive army, nor does it wish to. Thousands receive discharge papers, including most veterans of the Russian campaign. After years of structure and purpose, however, harsh, these men must reintegrate into civilian society. Your own discharge comes in May 1814. The document recognizes 6 years' service, lists campaigns and battles, and grants a small pension for your injuries. Bernard receives similar treatment despite his recent promotion. The Bourbons are particularly eager to remove officers loyal to Napoleon. What will you do now? You ask a lieutenant as you share a final bottle of wine outside the regimental headquarters. Bernard shrugs. Find a woman willing to. Overlook certain damages. Start a tavern or smithy. Try to sleep through the night without seeing ghosts. The question haunts your journey home. What does a civilian life hold after what you've experienced? How do you explain? Russia to family who've never left their village? What skills does a soldier possess beyond killing efficiently? Your return to your native village creates less celebration than you anticipated. Your parents greet you with tearful embraces, but there's fear in their eyes when they look at you directly. Your brothers maintain careful distance, as if your experiences might somehow contaminate them. The girl you once hoped to marry is now a mother of 2, wedded the tanner's son who avoided conscription through occupational exemption. You've changed, your mother says on your 3rd night home. The politeness of your welcome wearing thin enough for honesty. You don't bother explaining how or why. They cannot understand. The only people who truly comprehend are those who marched beside you, who froze and starved and fought across a continent. Your real family now lies scattered across France. Men who shared experiences beyond civilian. Comprehension. Adjustment comes slowly, painfully. You find work as a warehouse guard, your military bearing an obvious hardness to turn potential thieves. The missing. Toes cause constant pain, especially in cold weather, but you hide the discomfort behind stoicism. At night, you drink wine until sleep comes, hoping to avoid the dreams that still plague. You dreams of endless snow and the cries of men left behind. Then in March 1815, impossible news arrives. Napoleon has escaped Elba, landed in France. Former imperial officers rally to his standard. The Bourbons flee Paris without resistance. The emperor returns to power, needing soldiers for the inevitable response from European powers. You don't hesitate. Within a day of the news reaching your village, you're on the road to the nearest recruitment center, discharge papers in hand. The decision defies logical explanation. You've seen the worst warfare offers, experienced cold and hunger beyond imagination, lost parts of body and mind that will never regenerate. Yet you go willingly, even eagerly, because despite everything, the army remains the only place where everything makes sense, where purpose is clear, where companions truly understand, where survival depends on factors you've mastered through terrible experience. The recruitment officer, a Russian, campaign veteran himself, missing half his left hand, recognizes what you are immediately. No medical examination, no questions about your feet, just a nod of understanding and orders to report to the assembly area where the 57th is reforming. Bernard is already there when you arrive, organizing men into squads with his characteristic efficiency. Your conversations requiring fewer words with passing years. Your experiences that broke many survivors. Somehow forge an unbreakable core in others, a capacity to endure whatever peacetime hardships might present. On summer evenings, you sometimes sit outside your modest home, watching the sunset while neighborhood children play. Nearby, their games often involve soldiers, battles, glorious charges, innocent approximations of realities they cannot comprehend. You never correct their romantic notions. Some illusions deserve preservation. Decades pass. The veterans of Napoleon's Campaigns dwindle in number. Each village loses its old soldiers one by one until only isolated survivors remain, living monuments to a receding era. The world transforms around them. New technologies emerge. Political systems evolve. Wars continue, though none approach the scale of the Napoleonic conflicts. By 1852, when Napoleon's nephew Louis, Napoleon, declares himself Emperor of the French as Napoleon III, few remain. Who will march with the original Bonaparte? Those who do receive ceremonial recognition from the new regime, medals, pensions, places of honor at parades. The genuine article becomes valuable as the legend grows. For those final survivors, such recognition comes too late to matter much. The young men who crossed the Neman in 1812 are now elderly, their bodies bearing internal scars far deeper than missing digits or saber wounds. They've lived entire lives carrying experiences that define them, yet remained incomprehensible to everyone else. In their twilight years, these veterans often share a common observation. They've lived too long, and not long enough simultaneously. Too long, carrying memories that never lightened, not long enough to fully understand why they survived when so many better men perished in Russian snow. The answer, if one exists, lies beyond historical record. Perhaps random chance determined who lived and died. Perhaps some innate resilience of body or spirit made a difference. Or perhaps survival itself was ultimately the harshest sentence. The obligation to carry forward testimony of things better forgotten. What remains certain is this: the men who marched with Napoleon experienced humanity's extremes, the heights of comradeship and discipline alongside the depths of suffering and moral compromise. They walked through hell and emerged transformed, carrying that transformation forward into peacetime society like seeds that would eventually influence European culture in ways still being understood 2 centuries later. And so, as you rest in your comfortable bed tonight, safe from bitter cold and desperate hunger, consider those who endure history's harshest campaign. Ordinary men who survived extraordinary circumstances. Their bones have long since returned to earth, their voices silenced by time, but their experiences, their endurance against impossible odds, continue speaking across centuries. Perhaps in that quiet space between wakefulness and dreams, you might hear their distant footfalls, the steady march of Napoleon's soldiers still, making their way home through endless snow. And with that thought, close your eyes and drift off to sleep.